Welcome to students again in the new session. So in the last lecture, we have seen how we can determine the area of different geometric figures whose one side is enclosed by any curve using the techniques of the definite integral. Now, in this session, we will see how we can determine the consumers and producer surplus using the techniques of definite integral, right? You know, consumer and producer are a very common concept which are very frequently used in economics, business as well as commerce. Consumer is a person which consumes the goods and services as per requirement. You all know from your 10th or 11th standard. Here we will determine the consumer surplus using the concept of definite integral, right? So before proceeding the consumer surplus or producer surplus, let me explain two basic functions which are very essential for studying any economic aspect. And these two functions are known as the demand function and the supply function, right? So how we define a demand function? Let P be the price which a consumer is willing to pay for a commodity X is governed by the demand function or demand curve, which is written as P is equals to dx as highlighted. Look at here, P is equals to dx. What does it mean? If P is the price which a consumer is willing to pay for a quantity X of a particular commodity is governed by the demand function that is being written as P is equals to dx. P is the price, D I am taking here because this is a demand function, that is why I am taking T. You can take any other thing. D for demand, X is the quantity demanded by the consumer, right? In general, the function dx is a decreasing function. You all know from your 11th or 12th standard, the demand curve or the demand function is a decreasing function. Decreasing means it goes downward because the quantity the consumer is willing to buy naturally declines when the price of a commodity increases, right? Whenever the price of a commodity will increase, so the quantity consumed by a consumer willingly will automatically decline. That is why it goes downward. Similarly, we have also another function which is known as the supply function. The price which a producer is willing to charge for a quantity X of a particular commodity is governed by the supply function, which is written as P is equals to Sx. S means supply. I have taken D for demand, S for supply, right? So what does it mean? It simply means the supply function is in general an increasing function. It goes upward because the supply of a commodity from the producer increases as the price of the commodity increases. So these are the two basic functions which are respectively known as the demand function and supply functions, which are very frequently used in economic activities, right? Now look at the figure now. I have shown these two functions. The axis X represents the quantity demanded or supplied. P is its respective price. So if you look at the graph, this which goes downward, this is the demand curve, and which goes up, this is the supply curve, right? And you know the point at which these two curves meet, right? I couldn't mention this point here. This is the point, we call it as E. The point at which these two functions, these two curves intersect is known as the equilibrium point, which is denoted by E. what is the meaning of equilibrium point? If I take E as XE and PE. See here, E means equilibrium. I am using the subscript E, means this is a point of equilibrium. So XE is the point of equilibrium and PE is the point of equilibrium, right? If XE/PE is an equilibrium point, then the price PE, which is known as the market price, is the price a consumer is willingly to pay for and a producer is willingly to sell for a quantity XE, the demand label of the same commodity. Are you getting the point? What does it mean? It means XE/PE means the price PE has been decided by the market of what? Of the quantity XE. It means the consumer will willingly pay rupees PE for a quantity XE to purchase, and a producer will charge the price PE for a commodity XE because the price PE is being fixed by the market of a quantity XE, right? I think this perspective, you all are well aware with these terminologies, but let me explain before proceeding the concept of the consumer surplus. So what we did here, we have taken here two basic functions, the demand and supply. Now look at these two functions. These two functions may be linear, and it may be non-linear, right? Non-linear. Linear means anything which is linear, its graph is a straight line. And anything which is non-linear, its graph is a curve. So here, the figure which I have shown, the supply and demand curves are shown in terms of curves. Therefore, we have taken non-linear curves. You can also take the linear curve, and when you will take linear curve, the demand and supply curve, will look like this. This is your, this is your X. In place of curve, you will get these straight lines. The rest is as usual. This is X and this is P, for example, P, right? Price, and this is the quantity. So demand curve will move from top to, this is P is equals to dx. Anything is linear, its graph is always a straight line. So the demand curve will be a straight line and it goes downward. And the supply curve, for example, it will look like, this is the origin like this. This is S is equals to dx. And this is the point E that is known as equilibrium point. So you can analyze these two functions as a linear as well as non-linear. I am not going to consider the concept of the linear functions because they are very simple and you all have already studied all these linear functions at your 11th or 12th standard. So I will here in this session consider the non-linear functions. Non-linear functions means the functions are the curve equations whose graph is a curve. So this figure is shown for the supply and demand function as non-linear functions, right? Now we can proceed for the consumer surplus. Look at this. First, define the basic definition of the consumer surplus. So the consumer surplus is the difference between what consumer is willing to pay and that of what they would actually pay. This is the formal definition of a consumer surplus, right? The consumer surplus is defined as the difference between what a consumer is willing to pay and that of what he would actually pay. So see how you will understand this. For example, you are expecting, you are able to pay 100 rupees for this pen, right? you are willing to pay 100 rupees for this pen, and when you go to market, anyhow, you are getting the same pen in 60 rupees. So what would happen? 100 you are willing to pay, but due to any reason may be anything else, it may be perfect competition in the market or anything else, you are getting the same pen in 60 rupees. So the difference of these two, that is rupees 40, is known as the consumer surplus for a single product. Means you are getting an economic gain of rupees 40 in a single pen, right? This is what the basic definition of a consumer surplus. Consumer surplus is simply represents the economic gain of the consumers during the purchase of the various product. So the same what I have stated in the definition, consumer surplus is the difference what consumer is willing to pay and then that of what he must actually pay. So 100 rupees is the price which consumer is willing to pay for this pen. But due to any reason, when he visits the market, he get the same pen in 60 rupees. So the difference what he is willing to pay and then that of what he actually pay, that is the market price. Rupees 60 is the market price. Rupees 100 is what he is willing to pay. So the difference of these two is rupees 40. The rupees 40 is considered as the consumer's surplus for a single product. Right? Now, you can interpret this concept with the help of an example. Look at this. This is our demand curve. P is equals to dx. Let me explain one thing more. We have discussed about two curves, demand and supply. Demand function is directly governed with the help of the consumer surplus. The consumer surplus is governed with the help of demand function. And the next topic, that is producer surplus, that will be governed with the help of supply function, right? So this curve like this is known as the demand curve, right? What is happening here, this is your market price, E, equilibrium price, dry perpendicular from E to A, this is A, and a perpendicular from here, this is to B. So what is happening here, see, let me explain it here in this figure. This is X and this is, say, P, and this is your demand curve. This is P. Wait a minute, this pen is not working. This is P, right? So this is your, say, demand curve, right? This is your P is equals to dx, what I have shown in this figure. Say this is a point of equilibrium, right? See what this equilibrium point says. If this point is, I have told you, XE and PE. So what is the meaning of XE and PE? A dry perpendicular from here and a perpendicular from here. Take this as A and take this as B. This is your origin, right? So what does it mean? This distance is XE. This distance is XE. And this price is PE, right? Try to understand the figure. This distance is XE and this price is PE. This means what? The market says if a consumer is purchasing this product XE, he or she will have to pay its price as PE, right? But what consumer is willing? Consumer is willing to pay more, right? So what is the consumer surplus? This area, this shaded portion, this is known as consumer's surplus. Are you getting the point? The definition of the consumer surplus is what consumer is willing to pay, and then that of what he actually pay. He actually pay that price which price is being fixed by the market, right? If a consumer is purchasing the quantity XE, its price fixed by the market PE up to here, but consumer is willing to pay more. He is expecting the cost of this pen fixed by the market is rupees 60. Understand by this example. The cost of this pen XE is a pen. Its cost is fixed by the market is 60 rupees. But consumer was expecting he can purchase the same pen in 100 rupees. So it will go beyond this line. So this portion will be represented as the consumer surplus. So this shaded portion in this figure is known as the consumer surplus. Now we have to determine this shaded portion, and we have just studied the area under the curve, right? We will use the concept of area under the curve to determine the consumers and producer surplus. Look at here. What is the area under the curve? The area under the curve will be start from the point this and move up to here, and then this, and then this, and up to this hole. This is the area under the curve. Okay, area under the curve. And what you want to calculate? You want to calculate the shaded portion. So if you subtract this rectangle, look at carefully, from the area under the curve, you will get the shaded portion. Are you getting the point? If you take this is your whole portion is area under the curve up to here. If you subtract from this whole portion this rectangle, you will get the area of the shaded portion, and that is what we did here. So see, the consumer surplus is equals to the area under the demand curve from 0 to XE. This is your 0, this is XE. This is the demand curve. Minus area of the rectangle OAEB, right? And we know from the formula, area under the curve is given by from 0 to XE dx. This dx is capital D, means demand, minus its one side is XE, other side is PE. So XE into PE is the area of the rectangle, minus PE into XE. So this is a formula which we will use to calculate the consumer's surplus. So what this formula actually represent, look at here, where the first portion 0 to XE dx and this dx also represents the total revenue that would have been generated by willingness of some consumers to pay more, and this PE and XE simply represents the revenue actually paid, right? So the first part 0 to XE dx, 0 to XE, wait a minute, this is 0 to XE, this is the demand function, and dx, this represents what? This simply represents the revenue that would have been generated by willingness of the consumer. What consumer is willing to pay. When you are leaving your home, you are expecting you will pay 100 rupees for this pen. So this is your 100 rupees. Minus XE into PE is the revenue generated by the market, because PE is the price of the quantity XE fixed by the market. So therefore the product of PE and XE will generate the revenue. So the difference of these two gives you the consumer surplus. You should also note one point, that is, consumer surplus is generally expressed in terms of same unit which are used for the price. So naturally the unit for the price is rupees. Therefore, the unit of the consumer surplus should also be taken as rupees, right? Now, consumer surplus, we have seen how we can determine the consumer surplus, but the situation is what the consumer surplus can be determined under two basic conditions. Number one, under perfect competition, and number two, under monopoly, right? So what happens under perfect competition? You all have studied these two concepts at your 11th and 12th standard. What is the meaning of the perfect competition? Perfect competition simply refers if there are a number of homogeneous products available in the market. And naturally, if there are many homogeneous products available in the market, then the price of the commodities are decided by the market, not by the producer. So what we will do in case of perfect competition, we have two functions, that is the demand function dx and supply function, that is sx. Whenever we want to calculate the consumer surplus under perfect competition, equate these two functions, demand and sx, and then simplify it. And when you will equate supply and demand functions both and you will solve it, you will get some values of x from this equation. This x should be taken as xe, the quantity demanded in the market. And once the quantity demanded in the market, you have put the value of xe in the demand function, you will get the price of the quantity decided by the market, that is being represented by PE, right? Are you getting the point? What I have explained? Whenever you want to determine the consumer surplus under perfect competition, equate the supply and demand functions first. Dx must be equals to Sx. And when you will equate these two equations, solve it for x. You will get some value of x. That value of x is being denoted by xe, the quantity demanded in the market, right? Xe means equilibrium point. If the quantity demanded in the market is with you, put the value of xe in your demand function, you will get its respective price decided by the market. So this is how you can determine xe and pe both. Case 2, you can also determine the consumer surplus under monopoly. Monopoly means there is only single product available in the market. And naturally, when there is only single product available in the market, then the prices of the commodity is not decided by the market, rather they are decided by the producer. And once the prices are being decided by the producer, so naturally he or she will choose a condition in which his profit is maximum. So what happens in this case, we know we have studied a number of conditions for maximization of the profit, and among all those conditions we will use only one condition. We know the profit is maximum when the marginal revenue is equals to marginal cost. In the same way as we did in the earlier case, that is perfect competition, dx is equals to sx. Here marginal revenue should be equals to marginal cost, and when you will solve these two equations, again you will get the value of xe from here, x or xe, that is the quantity demanded in the market. And naturally, if you have a quantity demanded in the market, put the value of xe in PE demand function, you will get its respective price decided by the market. So this is how you can determine the consumer surplus under perfect competition as well as under monopoly. So what we did till now, or what you learned from these cases or this formula, the formula for the consumer surplus is what? CS is equals to C0 to XE, the demand function, minus PE and XE. Now look at this formula very carefully. What we need to calculate the consumer surplus? We need again three components. You must have the demand function in the question, right? If the demand function is there, you can very easily determine the quantity demanded in the market. and if the quantity demanded in the market has been calculated, put this quantity demanded in the market in the demand function, you will get its respective price, right? So if dx is there, that is the demand function should be given to you, right? And then two terms p and x, either p is known or x is known. Out of these two, price and the quantity demanded, only one quantity must be known to you. If x is known, put the value of x in the demand function, you will get the value of p. And if p is known, put the value of p in the demand function, you will get the value of x. So this is how, if PE is there, XE is there, demand function is there, then you can apply the formula to determine the consumer's surplus. So this is how we can determine the consumer surplus in general, as well as under two basic conditions, either the consumer surplus under perfect competition or the consumer surplus under monopoly. So students, we should stop it here and we will continue the numerical questions in the next session. Thank you very much.